have been since 2001, and I'm also the executive director of the Westchester County Historical Society. I actually prepared a PowerPoint for the 100th anniversary of the Garden Club.
Wow.
And so this is basically the same thing but enhanced. I put a lot of time in it over the last few days. But I am going to start by saying that the last 10 years are not included for a number of reasons. But we will keep adding on to this, and I encourage you to take pictures to keep your records. As you all probably know, I made sure that there was an archive of New Rochelle Garden Club here at the library as part of the New Rochelle archives, and you can keep adding to it. And that allows future generations to do a program such as this. The interesting thing about the New Rochelle Garden Club, I'm sure you all know that it is one of the earliest in New York State. And having been formed in 1911, as you'll see, it has had a long history that really coincides with American history and the history of New Rochelle. This garden club has changed considerably over the years with the times, though some things have remained the same, at least as far as I know. So we'll get started now. Here's your wonderful logo. We're going to go back to the turn of the last century when New Rochelle had, in 1900, a population of 14,000. Here's Main Street, and you might recognize this building with the arches. That's the curtain shop today. That was the arcade building.
But I think it's closed, right?
It's no longer the curtain shop, but there's still a bowling alley in the basement. That was from the 1898 building when it was an arcade. As I tell kids, it was like an early New Rock City with all the games and things. And the thing with the eave overhanging is the Lambden building, which also still stands today. Another picture of Main Street, which was very busy. It's one of the oldest main streets in Westchester and even in the country, because it was formed around the Huguenots' early church, which was Trinity Church. Not this building, this is the fourth, but on land nearby. And another Main Street looking towards a tall American flagpole, that was in front of City Hall. And 9 miles of waterfront have always played a significant role in our community, with the early Huguenots using it for trade purposes. Even before, the Native Americans that settled along the banks found an abundance of shellfish. And these were Lenape of the Munsee-speaking peoples who encamped all along Long Island Sound.
That was Davenport Park, the photo.
No, this is Hudson Park, actually.
Oh, Hudson Park.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. It all looks pretty much the same, but
Well, I only said that because of that,
the rocks.
the concrete wall and the rocks.
Oh, but this is actually Hudson Park had that same similar, but good eye. And this is a very early illustration of what was downtown New Rochelle when the Huguenots settled it. So this is a picture from the early 1700s, and that is the second church building. When the Pells sold the 6,000 acres of land that would become New Rochelle, they threw in another 100 for the church. That's why we have a church street and a Trinity place, and on which the first school was. Thus we have a Trinity school. And the downtown grew around that church.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Who sold 6,000 acres?
John and Rachel Pell, P-E-L-L.
Of the Pells.
This is a oil painting of New Rochelle in the 1800s, and it's a wonderful illustration because it depicts New Rochelle's agrarian society. So when the Huguenots first settled in 1600, they chose wisely. It was property that was on the water for trade and for food. It was very fertile soil, incredibly fertile soil, and it was on the Boston Post Road, the first major thoroughfare between Boston and what was becoming the mercantile capital. And along the Sound Shore, they grew a great deal of hay. There were also salt hay meadows. These crops, like hay, wheat, as well as other crops, could be turned into products by the tidal mills that operated not only by the tide on Long Island Sound, but also on the Hutchinson River. The Burtis Mill was an active mill up in Cooper's Corners at the end of what's now North Avenue.
Barbara,
Yes?
do you know anything about the artist?
I do, but I don't have it with me right now. This was a painting that was sent to me to identify the location, which I could say, well, it's on Long Island Sound in New Rochelle,
Yeah.
probably Davenport Neck,
How do you know it's New Rochelle? Is there anything?
because the painter had said it was New
Oh,
Rochelle
painter.
on the back.
And where is this painted?
I believe it is in storage. There are two paintings of New Rochelle at this time period, and one is at the Met, and the other I'm not sure, but I can let you know.
The Met?
Yeah, there's another at the Met. It's in storage, right? It's not.
Metropolitan Museum of
Yeah.
Art.
Mhm.
And what year do you?
This is mid-1800s.
Okay.
Interestingly, in ragtime, they talk about this, Dr. O, of course, he based the book on New Rochelle, and he talks about the salt hay meadows at the bottom of the hill. So our soil was so good that New Rochelle was at one time called the City of Orchards and the Town of Gardens, and there were a number of fruits cultivated here, including the mammoth berry, also known as the Lawton berry, pictured here. Some of you might have met Frank Budding, the incredible arborist who lived in town. He was able to get some Lawton blackberries from a nursery in Texas, and I planted some in the garden right off the children's room. They've redone the garden, so unfortunately the blackberries are no longer there. But I know that Father Gaylor and Michael planted some in Rochelle Park, so we have them growing again. But it's named Lawton Berry after the same family that the street down there is named. There was also a raspberry and mulberries. We have letters, they're actually at Harvard, but they're online, so we have them too, of Susan B. Anthony when she spent some time here taking the place of a headmistress of a boarding school who got sick. She wrote a lot of letters, and she wrote home talking about New Rochelle's mulberries and how she was cultivating silkworms with these mulberry bushes, which I find is so fascinating. If you walk along Center Avenue, the mulberries used to be splattered all over the pavement. You know, you'd get these blood-stained looking splotches. The other very prominent fruit were pears. There was the parsonage pear, Huntington pear, and the Churchland pear. Churchland pear was cultivated along Church Avenue, the Huntington pear on the Huntington Farm, which was near the east junction of Main and Huguenot. And I discovered some of these early pear trees growing on Davenport Neck at what's now New Dawn Foundation. So by the 1800s, New Rochelle was still agrarian, but it was quickly becoming a resort community as well. I used to give these talks to 8th graders, and one very unique 8th grade teacher told the students, yeah, it was just like Miami Beach. No, it was not like Miami Beach. It was like this sort of Currier and Ives looking picture. This was the Neptune Hotel. It sat at the crest of Neptune Park, which overlooks Glen Island today, and the former Fort Slocum dock. You see the steamboat coming in. The pilings that you see over to the right are still there, right below the Sharkey horseshoe courts and bocce courts. But New Rochelle was becoming this great location because of steamboats. They could bring people from Manhattan out of the dirt and the disease-ridden areas and the poor sanitation and the smog out into the clear air on a steamboat ride down the East River into Long Island Sound, coming to New Rochelle to stay in the Neptune House in point of salubrity unsurpassed by any. And there were all kinds of other resorts along the way. That's another talk. And a lot of the people who came to New Rochelle on the steamboats liked the place so much they ended up staying here for good. We have many accounts of people who had that very experience, including a number of very wealthy individuals. These wealthy individuals built summer cottages here, and then eventually some would live here year-round. We have a number of examples. These are two lovely paintings by Lydia Field Emmett. The Emmets were an amazingly prolific and important family, descended from Robert Emmet, the Irish martyr. His brother and sister left Ireland and came here and had a number of family members stay in the Pelham, New Rochelle area. And Lydia Emmett became a very well-known artist. Her work is at the National Portrait Gallery. She did the First Ladies, two of the First Ladies paintings are at the White House. She and two other Emmett women were extraordinary artists. And I just love these paintings of hers because it shows what New Rochelle was like in some of these gilded age properties. This rose trestle, if you've been to the Jay Heritage Center garden, it's almost the same thing. And that was done by one of the first female landscape architects, who was the great-granddaughter of John Jay. And they replicated the rose arbor. And this is another painting done by Lydia Emmett.
Totally different style than the others.
You think so?
The previous, the one on the left reminds me of a painting of Monet.
Yeah, they're just so.
Is it EMMETT?
EMMETT. And many of them are buried in a Beechwood Cemetery. When I've done tours, I have a big family tree that I hide behind a tombstone to bring out, because there's so many, and so many have been incredibly important individuals in American history. I'm not going to even go into it. That's a whole nother topic when I do the Irish heritage of New Rochelle. I could go on and on about the Emmett family. But these are very important too, because they show the importance of the garden during this time period. We're cresting on the City Beautiful movement. And in the Gilded Age, people hired architects to design extraordinary houses that showed their wealth, and they hired landscape architects, a new term, to do their gardens, which were also going to show their wealth. Many of them were the classically designed. Kite Kit is a perfect example. They had Bosworth design the house and then design the garden as well, the same architect. The same with Lyndhurst. These gardens were very important to show your wealth. And what was happening with the wealthy was going to filter down to the upper middle class and the middle class.
Not much has changed.
And those upper middle class and middle class were coming to New Rochelle in droves. They were building cottages such as these. They were called cottages. They were the shingle style design houses. We're talking late 1800s, classically with a porch, with the turret. These happen to be in Rochelle Park, which is the historic district behind City Hall, which started in 1880 and was laid out as a residential park. This was incredibly important to New Rochelle because by 1915, we would have almost 40 residential parks. These were neighborhoods that were laid out in park-like settings. Rochelle Park was the first here, started, as I said, in 1880. It came after only Tuxedo Park and Llewellyn Park. Tuxedo Park having been designed by Alexander Jackson Davis, and Llewellyn Park also earlier. It's often said that Rochelle Park was the third planned neighborhood. It's not quite right, but I think it's correct to say it was the third planned residential park. And what made these residential parks park-like were common areas, many different open areas that were landscaped. The streets were not done in grid-like fashion, but would keep to the tone of the aesthetic, the topography of the land. There were Serpentine is one of the streets in Rochelle Park. This is Pintard Avenue in Residence Park down in the south end of town, and it's nicknamed Snake Hill because it snakes down. And there was a big green, this is also Residence Park. You know, in Rochelle Park, there's that huge circle, there was the court, and there was, in Rochelle Heights, the court with the tennis courts. Residence Park has this big open area, and there were setbacks, so there was breathing space. And in Rochelle Park, there was an alley down a boulevard to mimic the Champs-Élysées. People could stroll down, tip their hat to the people on the porch. And people were coming to New Rochelle by the tens of thousands. Between 1900 and 1930, the population quadrupled. At the same time, New Rochelle was being put on the map thanks to Henry Siebrecht. He was a German who had emigrated from his homeland in the 1800s with only a backpack. He would end up being one of the most prominent, wealthy florists and nurserymen and landscape architects in the country. A whole nother topic, but this is one of his catalogs. It's in the Smithsonian. There were miles and miles and miles of greenhouses that stretched from North Avenue all the way to the Hutchinson River. This is about where Rose Hill is today, where you see this gazebo. You'll see this picture of the gazebo today soon. So it was incredibly important. He brought in the first winter blooming lilies of the valley because he would create the wedding bouquets for all the society people, including Helen Gould at Lyndhurst, and many, many others. He helped lay out the botanical gardens. He helped lay out the Hippodrome, never mind, I can't remember the person's name.
So his name was William
Siebrecht. It's Siebrecht.
And you say he helped to lay out the New York Botanical
He did,
Garden?
and many others. Fascinating individual, and so was his firm, which went strong until the Depression. Two things happened that brought down his business, well, three things. One is he lost all of his children before they were 50. I think he had 6. And his son, the one who lived the longest, got embroiled in a messy divorce and ended up moving to California. Also, anti-German sentiment had a huge impact on his business, and World War I. But at any rate, he was also president of the village of New Rochelle at one time, and was responsible for the widening of North Avenue. And here's the same gazebo today. It's behind this first Tudor on Rose Hill as you're going down the hill from North Avenue, beautifully restored. So, in 1911, a group of women got together, and they, let me get my names here. They were led by Mrs. William Anna Noyes to form the New Rochelle Garden Club. So it was officially organized October 21st, 1911, when the Constitution was adopted by 25 members. And this was their mission, which you can all read. Basically, gardening, promoting skill in arranging, conservation, and encouraging civic beautification. By the spring of 1912, the club's membership had grown to 100. And its flower, fruit, and vegetable show was front page news of the, at that time it was the New Rochelle Paragraph. It took place on the property of W.W. Bissell at the corner of Pelham Road and Center Avenue, near where this picture, this postcard picture was created. And it had categories, I got such a kick out of this, such as the best peck of green peas in the pod, best 12 blooms of peonies, best 6 stalks of Canterbury bells. Very particular, and as you are very well aware, the Garden Club would continue to be very particular in its shows as to what people. So the locals streamed in by carriage and automobile to see the June 14th show, and the police came, they were on hand to avoid confusion and secure safety from accident, because they were swarming. So the group then started meeting in the homes of different members, including the president. This is the home, and of course it was never by first name, it was Mrs. Peckham. Mrs. Wheeler H. Peckham, who was the president of the Garden Club from 1915 to 1917. She had one of the big houses on Davenport Neck. And Mrs. Lawrence V. Enton, who was the treasurer at the time, who lived on Montgomery Circle, also opened up her house. Her husband was a civic engineer who laid out many of the residential parks. He also designed the Waikagill golf course. And Mrs. Henry Winans at 85 Overlook Circle was the president between 1919 and 1920. And this is a picture of her house and gardens. As you can see, these women had extraordinary gardens. My guess is they did not tend to them themselves, but would oversee the many gardeners that would take care of them.
Where is this?
That's on Overlook Circle, 85 Overlook Circle. And this was the home of Mrs. Delancey Astor Kane, who was also a member. You don't see a beautiful garden here. She was one of the 7 Iselin children. The Iselin family, probably the most prominent family in New Rochelle. 6 of them had homes on Davenport Neck. The 7th had his at the end of Premium Point. That was All Views. That was C. Oliver Islin's home. He was the 5-time America Cup contender.
Wow.
Mrs. Delancey Astor Kane, talk about marrying money and money, was a member of the club, as was her mother, Mrs. Adrian Eleanor Iselin, as well as another daughter, Georgina Iselin, who never married and was a papal countess, but they all were members of the Garden Club.
Is this the same Iselin as Iselin Terrace in Larchmont?
Yes. They owned 80% of Davenport Neck. Today, the only house of theirs that still is standing is Davenport Club, which they're now calling Davenport Mansion, and it's been greatly altered since William Iselin lived in the house. But Davenport Club, interestingly, was a frequent site of Garden Club events and luncheons, of course. Everybody would get their choice of salmon and chicken and peach melba for dessert. So one of their first endeavors was beautifying the New Rochelle train station, which is not surprising because this was a significant place for New Rochelle, having been the cause of New Rochelle becoming one of America's premier suburbs. And so by 1916, the members were rolling up their sleeves to tackle problems beyond their own backyards. And a whole campaign began for civic betterment. The ranks organized, and one committee alone took care of the railroad station. Another beautified the new New Rochelle Hospital, pictured here.
Wow.
Yeah,
Where's that now? Where's
it's
it
gone.
down?
It's gone. It was on Huguenot Street.
Oh, wow, that's nice.
And during World War I, which would happen in 1917, they would also make their way by rowboat and ferry over to David's Island to help bring beautiful things to the many soldiers. Fort Slocum was the largest recruiting depot east of the Mississippi, and the Garden Club members felt it was their duty to make sure these recruits had beauty in their lives before they went off to war. They also brought fresh flowers to the hospital that was there, and this was particularly poignant during the flu epidemic in 18 to 1919, because so many people were dying. More men died of the epidemic than fighting, and a number, of course, were cared for at the hospital at Fort Slocum. And during World War I, they helped children grow victory gardens, shown here, and they themselves were very involved with victory gardens.
You said there were 100 members approximately?
Approximately, probably by then there were even more. And this was the time that women were organizing. The World War I was just the tipping point for women. They had started to feel their own. Many women in New Rochelle were fighting for suffrage, for fighting for the right to vote. World War I came and they organized just unbelievable efforts for the war, saving food, making bandages. In New Rochelle, it was extremely significant because they were caring for all of these recruits coming in. I have one story about one fateful week, December 1916, when they cut off the 1917, when they cut off the draft, and thousands upon thousands of young men poured into the New Rochelle train station to get the trolley to the dock, to get to Fort Slocum, to enlist before the draft. So many poured in, they closed the fort. Then a blizzard hit. So New Rochelle women opened up their organizations, their churches, their synagogues, Germania Hall, which was across the street, the YMCA, schools. They started cooking, they started collecting bedding and what they call comfortables, cigarettes, postcards. It was this phenomenal effort that happened in this 1 week. And at the end of the week, they had safely housed, clothed, and entertained over 10,000. There were only a little over 10,000 people in the community. And this was a real turning point for New Rochelle because the entire community, whether they were WASP or not, came together. In fact, the woman who led the whole effort was an Armenian woman. That's a whole nother story. We're moving into the 20s and 30s, and this would be significant because World War I had shown women, not only in day-to-day life, how to participate, organize, and be important, but also they had taken over the work of men who weren't there to do it. In Tuckahoe, Hogman Rubber Company, the different plants, even in New Rochelle, women were taking over. So by the 20s, they know they can get things done, and their civic organizations were loaded with efforts to better their communities. And this was the Women's Club shining. They had the Club Candle, which was a major publication. They had committees investigating everything from education to health to helping new Americans, just phenomenal. And the Garden Club was no exception. They were doing the same things. And the 20s was boom year. The houses were going up like crazy. You can see as you drive around New Rochelle, all the revival style houses. This was the 20s. And this was an amazing boom time. I get a phone call frequently at my office at the Historical Society. You know, my house is 100 years old. Can I get it designated? And I'll say, 100 years old? Yours and tens of thousands of other houses in Westchester. This is not a big deal. Any rate, so, and our downtown was crazy busy, and the Art Deco today still shows how important the downtown was during this period. They built the buildings, no expense spared, because they want to attract wealthy people. And there were loads and loads of shoe stores, including this one right here. So beginning in the 20s, they continued their efforts to beautify the hospital. You can see it's changed now. It's actually a brick building.
It's just not as it exists?
Well, part of that is the ER area, part of it.
Oh, so this is the new,
This is the current building, but you won't recognize it. It's been, actually, I think this is Iselin Hall on Van Gilder, but that's been redone. And the ER would be over around the corner.
Oh, I thought it was Roosevelt School, that's how off I am.
And this was the time period when they also the Garden Club chose to start helping their city, which was a relatively new city, having just incorporated in 1899. This is a cottage at Hudson Park, and it was here that the Garden Club planted a huge rose garden. Now, this was the time that roses were the most fashionable thing, and the International Garden Club, with its headquarters just down the street at Bartow Pell Mansion, had exquisite roses, and this was the big thing, to cultivate roses. By this time, the greenhouses had been put in Hudson Park for the Parks Department to grow flowers to plant in all the parks, but it was Hudson Park where the Garden Club really made their mark. And you can see the bird bath. They had a very classically designed, symmetric garden. And here are the greenhouses that were built, now torn down, sadly. They were Lord and Burnham greenhouses.
Wow.
And it was at this time in 1923, actually 1924, that the club chose the marigold, the French marigold, to become its emblem. In 1923, the year before, interestingly, they created a tree group that was formed to protect trees in New Rochelle. And the next year, in addition to adopting the French marigold, that was the year they became a charter member of the State Federation of Garden Clubs.
What year was that?
1924. 2 years later, they would take on the newly named branch of the New Rochelle Public Library to create a rock garden, and it had some award-winning irises. Before that was a library, it was the home of the Malsteads, and the Malsteads ran a very lucrative ice-making business on the Twin Lakes in front of the high school. When Freon was developed, it was coincided with the current high school, which is now City Hall, needing to be built. And the land was perfectly suited. It was more central than the former high school, the first dedicated high school, now City Hall. And so the land was bought by the school district to build the high school. You see how big the lakes were at the time. And when it first opened, it was the Woodrow Wilson High School. This would later, Huguenot Park, along the top edge, would become enlarged, and the Garden Club would have a great impact on it over the years. The other project they did, another iris bed, was in front of the library. This is the former library on Main Street at the corner of Pintard Avenue. That was built, the first dedicated library was completed in 1914, funded by Andrew Carnegie. The building still stands. Recently the city has taken it by eminent domain, and we hope that it's going to become a public-private partnership for a cultural history center.
Where is this now?
It's on Main Street at the corner of Pintard Avenue, right near the Soldiers Monument. It has been owned by the Hagedorn Company since it was sold by the library when this building was completed in 1978. When this library was in full gear, they had exhibits by the New Rochelle Art Association, which right now has its exhibit in the beginning in 1913. So this is where Norman Rockwell and Joseph Leyendecker and all the great illustrators first exhibited. And it was also where the garden club met. And the garden club had a junior garden club. And I learned from when the library celebrated its 100th anniversary, we asked for, this is before I worked here, I was just a volunteer, we asked for well-known individuals to send us their recollections of the library. And Robert Anderson, pictured here, he was the author of Tea and Sympathy, and I Never Sang for My Father, and other well-known plays. He grew up in this house on Elm Street, and he was one of the members of the Junior Garden Club. And he wrote to us his memory of being a member of the Junior Garden Club. Yeah. Another one loved that library was Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, lived next door. Anyway, that's another thing. This is a picture of Carrie Chapman Catt. Mrs. Catt was the woman who took the gavel from Susan B. Anthony, not by force, it was given to her. Don't think it was by force, and led the country to the ratification of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. This was in 1920, and 8 years later, she would settle in New Rochelle on Payne Avenue, fortuitously right up the street and on the former farm of Thomas Paine, whom she admired greatly, he having been a great proponent of women's and people of color's right to vote back in the 1700s. Carrie Chapman Catt moved into this house in 1928, and by 1929 she became a member of the New Rochelle Garden Club. Interestingly, she moved from Newcastle, where they lived on Juniper Hill, and it's been said that she left because she didn't like the junipers. People were harvesting their berries to make gin, and she was a teetotaler. I've also heard that she bought the house so that people wouldn't be able to use the berries for gin. There's some story wrapped up with a Women's Christian Temperance Society of which she was a member. This is her great house. She could have teas for 200. Usually it was for causes such as Women for Peace and Disarmament, but it's great to know she was also part of the garden club.
Does that still stand?
It still stands at 120 Payne Avenue. And the garden club was continuing its efforts by beautifying places like the Colburn home. This was a home started by wealthy individuals as a retirement home for their workers. And it was used as such until they couldn't keep up with Medicare and the changes in the health system, and it closed in 2004, 2005.
Where was that?
That was on Clinton Street, over off near Mayflower and Webster. And they also worked to beautify, and I wish they'll do it again, the former YMCA, which is now 175 Memorial Highway, where New Rochelle Radiology and other companies are, and they have those wacky trees planted. I should be careful because who knows who planted them, but I don't think any of you did. Yeah, if you notice as you go down Memorial Highway, they have like the weirdest assortment of trees just planted in the front yard. Never figured it out. And they also worked to beautify, though you can't see it in this picture, City Hall, which at that time was located on Main Street, just down the corner. This was Mechanic Street, not Memorial Highway, and that was the City Hall.
That doesn't exist anymore.
No, that was torn down in the 60s, and then they moved into the current building, which was the former high school building. So now you're wondering why I have this picture. This is a picture of Jay Downer, who was the engineer for the Westchester Park Commission. I have a whole program on the Westchester Park Commission because they're my heroes. They were the group that purchased or took the property that would become the first park system in America, which is the Westchester Park System between 1922 and the crash. And Jay Downer was also the engineer for the first parkway in the country, which was the Bronx River Parkway. And he was the guest speaker at the 1930 annual meeting of the Garden Club, which was held at the Glen Island Casino. Known for its big band sound in the 20s until and through the 30s, late 20s through the 30s, but also these Garden Club ladies, women, had this wonderful talk by Jay Downer, and at the time the president of the club was Regina Newhouse, a very excellent horticulturist. She had her own rock garden nursery. She lived at the corner of Quaker Ridge Road and North Avenue. There's a very old house there that had been one of the headquarters of General Howe, the general for the British troops when they encamped in New Rochelle. It would later become her house, and right next to it was a chicken coop and a cider mill, which they also owned. Her husband, Charles, was a very well-known sculptor, but they constantly had arguments, and they were in the newspaper a lot. And they were always having squabbles, and at one point Regina ended up living in the chicken coop, as reported in the Standard Star. But she was an extraordinary woman, and they gave her a great tribute at one point to say she was a true gardener and truly the best president of the Garden Club because she encompassed it all. And she had a little nursery, as I said, near where the Quaker Ridge Shopping Center is today. But anyway, she was the president, and she got Jay Downer to come and speak. Another speaker was Louise Beebe Wilder, who was the leading horticulturist of the day, particularly for suburban gardeners. In fact, wrote a book. She wrote all of these books. She also wrote one just on suburban gardening. She lived in Bronxville for quite a while, and she started the Working Gardeners of Bronxville. I spoke to that group last year, the year before, very big crowd, and they explained that there was also a garden club of Bronxville, and I said, okay, so the Working Gardeners of Bronxville, you're the guys that actually do the planting, and the other ones hire gardeners? And they said, yes, basically. But at any rate, Louise Beebe Wilder was a huge influence on what was going on with gardeners. In 1932, this is a program, the Garden Club has planted 100 Japanese cherry trees along Huguenot Lake. That's the Twin Lakes in front of the high school. That would not be the first time. And you see they named the plantings, the kinds of trees they were: white, blush pink, bluish pink, deep pink. And this was for teachers to teach the children the names of the cherry blossom trees. And they had the dedication on May 13th. This picture is probably of a later one, because at the time they did not have the color photography. So this was one of the other plantings that happened at the high school. And also in 1937 is when the club took responsibility for the Shakespearean garden at Davenport Park. The garden had started by the Avon Bard Club in 1908 under the guidance of Catherine Bates Barnett. You'll hear more about it shortly. Also in 1937, that's when they got the garden. I should say that they were the ones, one of the Garden Club members was the one who brought ivy from Stratford-on-Avon to plant there. The wonderful invasive that is in the Shakespearean garden today, I think controlled. And as you know, the garden was, so they took the responsibility in 37, but it wasn't officially ceded over to your group until 1985. And I was there for that moment. They had Shakespearean lute player, Kitty Lockwood, who was a member of the Avon Bard Company. What a great woman. In her 80s, she broke her wrist ice skating. She was just a hoot. and she was there, and they had Shakespearean readings, and Mrs. Hamburger was one of the members, and Joe Curtis, who was the commissioner at the time, introduced her as Mrs. Frankfurter. And I was like in the Parks Department at the time, and I'm going, no, it's Hamburger, not Frankfurter. Anyway, okay, now we're moving up to the 40s and 50s. This is Main Street, and you notice it's two-way traffic. We're going to be seeing that again in just a few months.
Oh,
Yes,
really?
yes.
Oh,
It's- Main Street's going back to two-way traffic.
Wow.
Interestingly, what you see here on the corner is Towners,
Yeah.
the former Towners. And the building that you see with the windows on the front, which had been the location of not Ward, the first department store in,
Cohen?
no, it was before. Anyway, it became Bloomingdale's,
Right.
and this was the first suburban Bloomingdale's in 1947. And this picture's from 1951. And so here we go into another era for the Garden Club. With the 40s, this is Fort Slocum, by the way. This is on David's Island, right off. This is where all the recruits were during World War I that I explained. Ferries would bring people over. It was a self-contained community, similar to Governor's Island, but smaller scale. And it had beautiful gardens maintained by the staff, some of whom lived in New Rochelle and would take the ferry. Children who lived on the island would take the ferry over and get a school bus. But during World War II, the Garden Club took over and would maintain the gardens on Fort Slocum, and had a relationship
How'd they get back and forth?
on the ferry. There were ferries, these were car ferries that ran continuously. That was the connection.
From where?
From Fort Slocum Dock, which still stands where the fishing boats are,
Yeah.
that you see as you're going over the Glen Island Bridge.
Right.
Amazing place. I have a whole story, I have a whole program just on
David's
David's
Island.
Island. I'm happy
Wow.
to give it if you ever, you can actually see it, it's recorded on the library's website under New Rochelle History. They have my program on it. And this is the YMCA that they did the garden for during World War II. That was located on at Fort Slocum. This was built in 1909 by a descendant of General Warner Slocum, for whom the fort is named. And you can see the gardens
So
here.
David's Island is totally.
Totally,
flat.
it was a federal grant paid for the cleanup of the island, which meant taking everything down. It's a whole story that I could go on for a long time. I worked very hard to preserve, but the bottom line was whatever was preserved, the City of New Rochelle, which owns the island, had to commit to and prove that they could maintain it. And there was no way that was gonna happen, so they were between a rock and a hard place. My HPAC, Historic Preservation Advisory Committee for the County of Westchester, came up with a fabulous idea to put a solar farm on one end of one side of the island and create a public-private partnership and save some of the buildings. But it was too big a scheme for anybody to even dream of. So everything was taken down. I will tell you that I insisted that the bricks, because a lot of the bricks we could identify, we had a number of people who were with the archaeology group MAFLA at Croton Point Park, could identify the brick manufacturer. We had them put the footprints of all the buildings out of these bricks. And the rest they smashed up, but those bricks are still there. It is poison ivy from one end to the other. It hasn't been a viable ecosystem since it was used for cattle grazing by the Huguenots. So it's these garbage Norway maples and the poison ivy, which is all about here. You have to wear a Tyvek suit if you're like me. So nothing left. There was a deer that when we would go out on the barge, we'd go out on the Army Corps of Engineers had this barge, and when we were on the barge, there was a deer that tried to get on with us. It was like, get me off this island, there's nothing for me here.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, crazy. There's no chipmunks, there's no squirrels, there's osprey. And the Army Corps of Engineers had to create osprey nests
Oh, good.
for those that they demolished. So, oh, by the way, during World War II, the Garden Club also had a number of victory gardens around town. And it was during the war that they started the tradition, I hope you still do it, of the Christmas wreaths. I can
Yes,
tell you for the
still do.
16 years I was the community relations coordinator here at the library, I so look forward to those wreaths. And I still have all the bases, so if you want the bases, yeah,
Oh, that's a
Oh,
great
wow.
idea.
I still have a lot of them,
Where
and I
are
kept
they?
thinking, at my house,
Oh,
I would take them thinking somebody could use these at some point, so.
Right, right.
But we would put them up on the soffit above the desk.
What do you think?
Yeah, that'd
Yeah.
be great.
So we used to have a newspaper that was a daily called the Standard Star, and it had great society pages for decades. The Standard Star was located in a building that's still standing next to the post office. It's long and thin because the presses were in the building, just as the Pioneer building, which still stands facing Lawton Street by the parking lot here, also was a newspaper building with its presses in the bottom, long and thin building. And the Garden Club was in so many of the society pages. Yes, it was a society thing. And after the war, these articles would resume with things like Autumn Show, features skillful use of color, club's veteran gardeners honored at their annual meeting. This is 1948. Again, they're back at the hospital, which has been enlarged again. And they actually started doing house tours, house and garden tours, to raise money to take care of the beds at the hospital. They do have pretty nice beds in front of the main entrance. They also did the beds in front of the Thomas Paine Cottage.
Wow, that looks great.
It does. Interestingly, this postcard says Huguenot House, and this is an earlier postcard than the 40s. This is not true to the year, because it says Huguenot House. This was a period of time early in the 1900s that Thomas Paine was still aligned by some people because he was an atheist, or they said
Right.
Teddy Roosevelt called him a dirty little atheist. And they went with Huguenot House over Thomas Paine Cottage. They also did the plantings at the Thomas Paine Memorial Library, which look just as robust today. You know, the evergreens are quite prolific.
Could I interrupt a moment? How do we get into that Thomas Paine memorial?
Building,
the
it's
library?
maintained, the memorial building, the brick building,
Yeah.
is maintained by the Thomas Paine Historical Association.
So we have to contact.
And
them.
Barbara Crane is my go-to person. She's terrific. She knows everything about everything. She's a very civic-minded person. She's involved with the Rotary. She's invited with Indivisible, all kinds of.
Because I would love to have a tour of it. I don't know if. anybody-
Well, there's just a small exhibit. You can have meetings there, and they're actually encouraging you. Today they had the New Rochelle Council of Community Services luncheon there. And so if if I can email you her contact information
Oh, please do.
to the Garden Club email.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you can wait just a little. I just had a new sign done, created, that has the inscription on the monument on a sign, because acid rain has taken off the words,
Right.
and the words are so powerful, particularly right now. The 13th chapter of the American Crisis Papers is so moving and so profound and so needed right now. So anyway, back to the Standard Star. Here you can see that, yes, they got dolled up. This is actually the dedication. They're here for the dedication with the president of the Downtown Association, because they've taken over pocket gardens in the downtown. to beautify it. And this also marked the time that conservation started in earnest. They did have the tree group back in the 1920s, but conservation were all of a sudden seeing a real concerted effort. And with this publication, before buying your Christmas evergreens, read the following pages. And then they observed their 40th anniversary. You can see the white gloves, and there were certainly tea pourers. And here, this was an event they had called Country Wedding, where they they replicated a country wedding, and they had over 1,000 guests, and they raised over $2,000 for it. And here you see a picture of them doing a bridal shower. Rare volumes greet visitors to Country Wedding. That was some books that they had also. They were meeting at this point at the North Avenue Presbyterian Church, which is just to the right of City Hall today, and now owned by the refugee Esperanza. Mariano Rivera's wife Clara is the pastor. Now we're getting into 60s, 70s, and 80s. This is a view after I-95 has come through and cut through the heart of our city. And things have changed, and the Garden Club is now meeting at the Presbyterian Church, which is located on Pintard Avenue. This is also where the Women's Club was meeting, and a few other organizations. This building, by the way, was designed by John Russell Pope, the same firm that designed Jefferson Memorial.
Beautiful.
If you ever have time to go in the sanctuary, it feels so Jeffersonian. And at this point, the Garden Club is beginning to become very involved with beautification. Once I-95 came through in 1955 and took out neighborhoods, particularly neighborhoods where people of color were living, created Memorial Highway and that crazy roundabout, created the biggest cloverleaf off and on ramp on I-95, put through Memorial Highway because it was going to connect the Cross County Parkway to I-95. The downtown lost all kinds of business. The mall was put in, sucked the lifeblood. They put one-way traffic on Main Street, and Fort Slocum closed. Also, a desegregation case that happened in 1961 brought down property values. So New Rochelle in the 60s had a confluence of negative things happen, which had a huge mark on the downtown. It suffered greatly, and you could see it in the buildings. It wasn't until the Downtown Business Improvement District came in with a facade program that helped get rid of the horrible facades that have been put up and try to rejuvenate. But the 60s and 70s saw this big downturn. That's when the library moved here in efforts to help the downtown rejuvenate. This building happens to be one of the greenest libraries in the country. 75% of this building was adaptive reuse from a parking garage.
Wow.
And a solar reserve was put in, a reserve for solar energy gathering was put in what's now the Children's Garden. It was a $500,000 grant, and unfortunately it was never used. The tank is still there. But at any rate, the building itself, and this was the first community center library for Westchester, because it was a mall sort of that went right through the lobby. At any rate, so here the New Rochelle Garden Club is getting involved with beautification. They're part of a citywide effort. This is Nancy Fraioli, a wonderful woman who actually, her parents were caretakers at Ward Acres and gave me all kinds of information. Her son is a well-known plumber in town and also has lots of information about Ward Acres. But if I can read to you just briefly what she had to say. This is 1978. Perhaps many people think of garden club ladies as tea-sipping, hat-wearing women, just saw the picture, ladies who create beautiful flower arrangements. Mrs. Fraioli did until she became a member and found out the real story. I don't want people to think the way I used to think. I was born here and I want New Rochelle to be back the way it used to be years ago. Although the Garden Club is a philanthropic organization as well as a social one, the club's main interest is city beautification. So that's when that whole effort began. But they still had flower shows. This is Mrs. Lester Albertson, who had that wonderful property. It was called Albertson Farm or Bantam Farm because they had Bantam chickens. If you go North Avenue to the end, make a right at St. John's Wilmot Church, and you're left on Wilmot. It's that property right there on the right, where you see a stone cabin that people think so old. That's not so old. The house is. The house was built out of enslaved people's quarters.
Would that be where Cooper's Corner is
Now,
now?
wait, if you make a right there, if you
Oh,
make
you
a
go
right
up
where
the
Cooper,
street?
go up the street and make a left, and Albertson Farm, where this woman lived, was all there on the right-hand side.
On the right-hand side, by Hanson Avenue?
Before Hanson, before that big monstrosity,
Okay.
the other house that sort of does not face the road, but faces a big lawn and that stone cabin,
Oh.
which came years after. It just looks old, but the house is old.
Wow. You said it housed enslaved people?
Yeah, and we believe there are enslaved individuals buried on the property. I've pushed for archaeological discoveries a few times on that because they keep talking about development. So here you see hundreds turn out for a flower show. They were held here at the library in some cases, and right across the street used to be a parking lot. The city would let the garden club take over the parking lot when you hosted the 9 federated shows, the big ones. Tents were put up at Memorial parking lot. I remember when I worked for Parks and Rec in the early 80s, I remember one of these shows right here across the street. And here you see some of, this is right outside. You see theater, that's there. But it's now the big Ossie Davis Theater sign on it. That's the door leading out to Memorial Highway. And you can see the very stilted designs, stilted to my taste at the time. And they're beautiful, and of course they were judged.
This is totally different.
And here's another picture of one of the garden flower shows here at the library. And here they are again in Shakespeare Garden, removing unwelcome plants. Weeds are shallow rooted. And here another article about the Shakespearean garden.
That's still the same.
They also were very active in the tricentennial. I was the executive director. This was in 1988, and unfortunately I have no pictures, but they did this planting right in front of the high school where it used to be a little more hilly, and they did these enormous, this size room, one of an American flag and one of a French flag. And this welcomed our 100 visitors from La Rochelle, France.
Oh,
They all saw it. It was really
Wow.
spectacular. It was spectacular.
Pictures.
Yeah, sorry, I have one. There's someplace. It was very well documented. So now we're coming into the late 1900s, into the 21st century. Still the luncheons. This is now at the Presbyterian Church. I'm sorry, this is 1993. You're still at the Presbyterian Church. This is Vicky Sterner. Does anybody know
Susie
Vicky?
McAvoy. Look, Susie McAvoy.
Yes,
Yes.
Susie McAvoy's been a member since 1967.
Betty Gordon.
Vicky's
You're on the very right.
on the very right. I don't
See,
know.
you're gonna recognize some people now, I
Can
think.
you read the
Vicki
names of those
Sterner
ladies?
for
We
sure.
can't read them back there.
Susie McAvoy, past president, Ann Ryder, decorations chairwoman, Vicky
Sterner, president.
and Betty Gordon,
Betty Gordon, okay.
past president.
Yeah, they were members, yeah.
Yeah,
Amazing.
Vicki Sterner, I met.
And that was 1993. Here's some young people winning an award from the Garden Club. And then the Garden Club moves into the Old Elks Club, which had been,
Right, that's when I started.
was the Elks Club when they moved in, still being used as the Elks, no longer. But formerly it was the home of Edward Kemble, who was a well-known illustrator and actually illustrated the Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and was very prominent, a prominent member of the New Rochelle Art Association. But that's just a little aside.
Where is this house?
That's at the in Rochelle Park, right off the boulevard. Its address is either Manhattan Avenue or the boulevard.
It's now a church.
Church, yeah. Oh, go back. And here we have Dorothy Temple, former White House chief floral decorator, presents Christmas at the White House. She was the floral decorator for the Nixon, Ford, Carter, and Reagan years.
And the Garden Club of Latchwood, can you just go back? It's
Yeah.
at the Garden Club of Latchwood, see? On Christmas.
And the Garden Club, so they joined.
And the Garden Club with Temple.
She probably cost a pretty penny.
Yeah.
She did.
And here we have the Garden Club presents Flowers and Fashions. This is 1998. And this was to raise money to build greenhouses at Columbus School. And I believe the greenhouses are still there. I don't know if it's the same
Mary
greenhouses.
Bowles.
Huh?
Those are.
And Mary Bowles, look.
Yeah. Those are, we did all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, there's Mary, I remember Mary Bowles well. I
Yeah.
worked with her on one of the flower shows here at the library. Betty Cole, Nancy Huzar, and Ann Ryder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
These, by the way, are all clippings from the New Rochelle Public Library vertical files. The librarians used to clip the standard star, and thank God, because even though eventually the microfilm will be digitized, it's over $100,000 right now to digitize it, so we're not doing it yet. Hasn't been done. But there are these big fat folders that I can scan and put up here. So these are all available, these scans. Here's Irene Schindler.
Yeah.
I heard somebody say that tribute
She
to her.
just died.
Did she? I was just Googling her the other day to see. She must have been 101,
300, almost 103.
103.
Yeah, just
Just
shy of
short of.
103.
So one day before she did.
Was it
a few days?
One day
Yeah,
before.
1 or 2 days before.
Yeah, and she was so
Before.
103.
Oh, she
Almost.
was, what a wonderful
Really?
woman.
One
day
before
before
her.
She was so elegant. I remember there was a Christmas dinner at Judy Phillips' home, and Irene must have known this was her last. And she had a red woolen tweed jacket with the hat, and she just looked so beautiful. And I have a picture of it in my mind, and I'm so sorry I didn't grab a picture of it in the.
Well, it's better in your mind. It's better in your mind.
Can't share it as quite as.
And in this article, she's talking about all the things the Garden Club does
Oh, nice.
besides just planting.
We should
And another one, and of
do
course,
that.
she and Joanne Bartoli were two peas in a pod,
Yeah.
particularly with doing the garden at St. John's, Wilmot, but they also started the Daffodil Festival.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget the two of them coming with their daffodil hats. I had a big party here, daffodil. And this is another beautification project at the YMCA. They also planted 300 spring bulbs at the Huguenot Children's Library, and funds also to help with the area around the high school. This is in 2001, cherry trees will be added in the spring to replace bent trees and increase the ornamental tree display in the area. They also had this horticultural therapy program at United Hebrew and Bayberry Nursing Home.
Yeah, Irene was.
We used to go and sing.
Sig.
Yeah.
Here's Irene again, and pictured on the top is Mary Bowles, Claire Lynch, Norma Abely, all friends of mine, and Irene Schindler. And again, she and Mary Bowles are below, and this is at the Huguenot Children's Library. And here's the celebration of 90 years with Nancy Fraioli, and others. You see Betty Gordon, Jean Davidson, who became the 105th member. No, the 1,005th member.
Wow.
Here are lifetime memberships to Gloria Ryan, Irene Schindler,
Irene Schindler's on the right.
an honorary membership to Vicky Sterner, honorary life membership to Vicky Sterner, who I think still lives
she
in
lives
the
in the
former
firehouse.
firehouse at the
Yes,
end
she
of,
does.
and her husband, her former husband, who's no longer with us, was the head of Firehouse Films in the former Terry Tunes building. I'm really off track now. And here it is, you have past presidents Nancy Fraioli, Leslie Nam, Betty Gordon, Betty Barolotti, Penny Pike, Ellen Newberry, Vicki Sterner, and Susie McAvoy.
Wow.
I think Susie's the only one still.
Yep.
That's when you started the garden tours. That was Irene Schindler and Joanne Bartoli and others. I remember them trying to get these people to say okay. Another fall flower show at the Elks Club. This is their New Rochelle Garden Club Award went to Mr. Leon and Karen
I
Trapp.
remember him and his wife, yes.
And Mrs. Tallard was recipient of the sleep stakes. And you had Ralph Stodsmith. He was I'm sure he wasn't at the
Radio person.
Botanical Garden when you were there. A lot of that's before your time. But I took for the landscape design course, I had to take a class from him. But he was also a well-known WOR garden guy. Early on, I forgot to mention T. Everett. T.E. Everett spoke to the garden club
did he?
about bulbs. Yeah,
About what?
bulbs. There's the T. Everett Rock Garden at the New York Botanical Garden. He was one of the speakers. They have really good speakers.
22 years ago, they were charging $30 per person. That's quite,
That's pricey.
that's pricey, right?
Yeah.
For luncheon, I don't think.
We're almost
so
done.
much.
Okay.
Oh, we have to leave.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, it's 6 o'clock, right?
No, I'm so sorry to disturb you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, the library closes at
I
6.
don't-
Is there music area around here where kids are playing music?
I don't know.
What is he saying?
I don't.
Oh,
Not here.
Not here, okay.
We actually don't until like 5:30. I did speak to them.
Oh, okay. But I'll hurry on. You all need to go home and eat dinner, right? I do. So here, the Arbor Day was always a big deal for the garden club. I have to say that part of me thinks that whenever there's anything to do with gardening or beautiful, let's call a garden club. So when the city had to do their Arbor Day to keep up their Tree City thing, well, let's call the garden club. You know, and the garden club is always great. There's Sister Miriam Therese, who was the first director of Office for the Aging, and others that the city hauled in for their photo shoots. Here's another award luncheon. You see the same people we've already talked about. Looking good.
That was
And
Regina, can you just go back?
yes, that's Regina,
Hey, started.
Yeah,
Ann Sproul. Yeah.
And Vicky,
Vicky's
Is that
there,
Marilyn
the tall
on the
one's
right?
Oh,
Vicky.
yeah, Vicky the tall
is Marilyn
lady.
still there?
No, Marilyn is, and I saw her in another picture though. She'll be coming up. Here's Joanne and Nancy Fraioli at the Shakespeare Garden. We were still doing things at the Shakespeare Garden when we did a big read of Shakespeare here at the library. I had a falconer go down there. This was the restoration in 2004 and 2005.
Wow.
Gets a new lease on life. There you see your same usual suspects in the corner, and Marilyn Pachillo's there also. You see her second to the right. And she's supervising. That's
What's the
just
date
right.
of this one? What's the date of this one?
This is 2004, October.
October 22nd, 2004.
Okay, so 21 years ago.
And they're still spreading holiday cheer. This is Catherine McSweeney.
Oh, I just talked to her this
I
morning.
saw she's on your list.
Yeah.
I run into her at the Acme occasionally.
Oh.
And there was beautification of City Hall. I think this was when the first idea came for the daffodils and the hostas, which was brilliant. Because the daffodils look terrible when they
And then the
die, but the
hostas
hostas in front of City Hall comes
Yeah.
really quickly.
Yeah.
So thank you, Garden Club, for doing
But the
that.
hostas are really not natives, are they?
No,
No.
no,
No.
so sorry, but if they're gonna plant.
But are daffodils a native, I
No.
don't think so.
Here was the beautification with the downtown business improvement district with Ralph DeBart and others, helping with that. Now it's part of Clean Cities, which the bid pays for, and for years they had Anthony Bufamonte's company, and they were spectacular, the plantings, but they lost the bid this year. Yeah, so we don't have them, because they really did pretty, really
So who took over?
eye-catching. I don't know the company. They lost the bid. Here's more garden. I remember Joanne Bartoli always trying to find new gardens for the garden tours, and this was Ada Friedman's.
Oh,
Ada.
You all know Ada
Do you
Friedman?
know
Oh, I
she-
know who she
Do
is.
you know she's still gardening?
Yeah, she's still growing seedlings for Rose Hill Nursery.
Exactly.
Yeah, in her
She
basement.
was a pilot.
She's
And
gotta
she
be
did
90s.
Something, and
Yeah.
she takes care, she and her husband, who's older than she is, takes care of their acre or however large their home and garden is. She's amazing.
So, here's 1909, the Secret Gardens, of New Rochelle, and this is at the library, Charlotte, somebody, I think she was just a visitor.
Right.
I think I have this because I actually supervised this one. And I'll tell you what I did I was a former caterer, so I always like doing special foods, and I still have them. Little seed packets, but it would have the picture of the fruit on the seed packet, but it would say prune and nut bread or banana bread. I did all kinds of tea breads,
Oh.
and then I did all kinds of flowers. I still have all the cookie cutters. If you need any flowers of cookie cutters, they're not native though, sorry. And I had dragonflies, cookies, and I did a whole garden of endive. I don't know, I can tell you the whole
Oh,
thing.
it sounds.
And that was for
sounds
the
wonderful.
and boy, they were so particular about how the tables needed to be arranged, and I'm going, holy smokes. But we managed.
Even more particular than the caterer?
I think that was the last time there was, there was one after that in the aughts that we had another one. Here's Garden Club, and I had a picture of,
Ooh,
the
wow.
one behind, Elliot Goldfinger's house. This is leading up to this is the Sparrows garden that is right above Elliot Goldfinger. Elliot and his wife have beautiful garden, and it's in the whole New York, Westchester, Boston Railway cut through.
Oh, right.
And this was on the tour
This is
that I happened to get.
Wow.
And the Garden Club still is helping you with the lovely Huguenot Children's Library, which I forgot to mention, we think is the first brick house in New Rochelle.
Really?
And that became the Malstead House when they had their ice making.
Maybe.
And this was celebrating the 100th anniversary. They were proudly announcing junior gardening at the Huguenot Children's Library. So I would coordinate to have the junior gardening program there. And here's the kind of things they did: indoor bulbs and recycled containers, planting seeds, creating bird feed, planting and tree discovery. And this would be coordinated with the books, which was such a good program. In front of the high school with the Twin Lakes.
Beautiful.
One other project that was more recent was the Blue Star Garden at the World War II Monument in Faneuil Park, which is at the west junction of Huguenot and Main Street.
Mary Bowles, every year hospice.
And again, the Shakespearean garden pictured here.
Had a sign.
It did, and then.
Well, the Parks Department got rid of all these signs and put up those monstrosities they have now. I don't care for the
They
design.
don't even have a sign.
No sign at all?
They took down our sign, and they didn't even replant it with anything we
Wow.
did.
Can we do it?
We can get one done for the
Very
grant money.
expensive.
But if we get one, are they gonna just take it down?
Oh, they did. They didn't ask.
That's what I'm saying, are we gonna just like get one?
Okay,
Oh,
very good.
Barbara, this is amazing.
And now your mission to increase knowledge knowledge of gardening, promote skill in arranging, foster conservation
We should
measures,
take- I
and
should
encourage
take-
civic beautification.
Actually, we should, I think in the Larchmont Garden Club book, we have